All right, Clinton, last try, man. You back?
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
There you go.
Okay, sorry about that. I'm on the Muslim side for sure. And let me just say, it's kind of offensive to throw the Muslims in with the Mormons, but I have a Jewish...
You said it's offensive?
It is offensive. You know.
Why is it offensive?
Well, I'll put it this way. There's an old Jewish joke. Why did God create Christians? So Jews, so Christians, or excuse me, why did God create Mormons? So that Christians will know how Jews feel. And I really do hear that from my Jewish brothers and sisters, because...
So does the same joke go for Christians? Like, there's a joke that says, hey, why did God create Muslims? And then the answer goes, so that they know, so that the Christians know how the Jews feel, or something like that.
Oh, okay.
We can keep this joke going, I guess.
Right. But Paul is the Joseph Smith of the first century. There's nothing about Paul's jumping into the Christian movement that we should believe. Why should we believe that Paul saw an apparition of Jesus on the road to Damascus?
You're right. So you say that you should not, you shouldn't believe, like, you have no reason to believe Paul's, claim of revelation on his way to Damascus. Do you have reason to believe Muhammad's so-called revelation in the cave of Hira?
Well, yeah. Well, Muhammad's revelation doesn't contradict everything we know about history. Whereas,
let's talk about it. Hold on a second.
Hold on.
What
I didn't mean to get out a snicker.
What about the cave of Hira? What about the cave of Hira matches what we know about history? Let's say even specifically the history of how prophets receive revelation. How does the cave of Hira match the historical fact of how prophets usually received revelation?
I don't know. I mean, Moses went up upon Mount Sinai and received a revelation from God.
Did he get choked out?
Did he get choked out?
Mm.
Well, I mean, Jacob is wrestling with an angel.
Yeah, but did Jacob get choked out? Did he think it was a demon that he was wrestling with?
Did he feel suicidal afterwards?
I don't know if he felt. No, Jacob did not feel suicidal.
So historically, we never see prophets feel suicidal or oppressed by the messenger that God sends, or even God himself. Yet we see Muhammad in this cave, supposedly gets this revelation and feels oppressed, comes out with his neck twitching in fear, to his wife to say, cover me, and wants to commit suicide after.
Are you saying depressed or oppressed?
Oppressed. And both, actually.
If you're thinking about, okay. But yeah, in the Hebrew Bible, you see all the time that when prophets encounter the angel of the Lord, that they are in gruesome fear of the angel of the Lord.
And what happens when they see him and they're startled? How does the angel of the Lord respond to their fear? Does he continue to oppress them and increase their fear, or does he comfort them and tell them, fear not?
Well, it depends on which verse. I mean, the angel of the Lord interacts.
Show me any verse where the angel of the Lord increased their fear, where he oppressed them.
I don't know. Well, I don't know if he increases necessarily their fear, but I don't know if he necessarily always relieves it.
There's never a time where the angel of the Lord appears and he oppresses the person he comes to. Never. There's never a time where he oppresses them. But we have Muhammad in the cave of Hira, who gets oppressed by this spirit entity. Well, so the question is, does that match the history of the prophets?
What do you mean by oppressed? Because being in fear, is that what you mean by oppressed?
No, not simply being in fear, because you can be in fear, but then be comforted or be reassured. But be in fear, have that fear amplified by physical attack, physical oppression, right? And continuous physical oppression. And like for what we have with Muhammad's example, we have him at the cave. A spirit comes to him, tells him to read. He can't read. Why is the spirit telling him to read if he can't read? And then when he can't read, the spirit then presses on him until he can't breathe anymore, and does this to him multiple times. The same process.
So similarly, we do actually have an oppression. I'm glad that you brought that out, because when Paul, and again, I don't believe this story, but when Paul allegedly through Luke Acts encounters the risen Jesus, what happens? He hears a loud sound. He's made to go blind. He's in fear of who's talking to him. And apparently he's still blind.
Where does it say he's in fear of who's talking to him? Where does it say he's afraid?
When it says a loud voice like thunder. I mean, that sounds pretty frightening.
But you just read that in there.
Okay, so maybe he's happy that a loud voice like thunder blinded.
But just Clinton, let's notice how I'm being honest with your.
But that's
source.
oppressive. Being blinded is oppressive.
Clinton, come on, man. I'm being honest with your sources. Be honest with mine. Does it say that Paul was in fear of the person he was speaking to?
Okay, I get the sense that he was in fear, but those words are not there.
All right, so it doesn't say that. So that you're reading that into the text. Here's my second question. Does the person who visits Paul announce who he is?
Does Jesus announce that he is the Lord? And he says, "Why are you persecuting me?" Yes.
Okay. Did the spirit in the cave announce who it was?
It did say it was a spirit of God. It did.
Really? Can you? All right. You know, I have the hadith actually. I have the hadith, and we're gonna I'm gonna just it's kind of long, so I'm gonna just skim kind of through it.
Are you going to screen?
Yeah. I'm gonna show it on the screen, and I want you to stop me when you see the part where that spirit announces itself as a messenger or angel of God. Okay. I want you to stop me when you see that part. So I'm gonna pull up the hadith. Sahih Bukhari 6-9. Man, actually, hold on. I just actually had this yesterday, or the other. Was it yesterday? Yeah, it was yesterday, man. We just read this yesterday, and the only thing we do around is we just read, man. Let's see if I could go back to that reference. I just had it in my phone. 6-9. What is it, guys? 6-9. Sahih Bukhari. Man, there's too much messages here.
Okay.
Book 1-3, maybe?
It's I'm on sunnah.com, so I go by these numbers. It's 6-9 something. I just need a reminder of what that hadith is. I just hit my people up. They'll send it to me real soon.
Me so pale.
Let's see. So 6-9-82.
Okay, go ahead.
6-9-82. There we go. All right. Let's go ahead and share my window here. Okay. So it's pretty long, like I said, but here it is, right? It talks about how Muhammad would receive dreams.
Wait, right? What is a divine? Wait, it's right there. I mean, what is that first one? Scroll up a little bit more. It says the commencement of divine inspiration to Allah's messenger. And I know that you know this, but messengers are in the English, the anglicized Angelos.
We don't got to do all that. This is talking about Muhammad and how he received revelation.
So what about?
So remember what I'm asking for. Do you remember what I'm asking for?
You asked. Say it again.
I'm asking for where the spirit who visited Muhammad announces who he is, or announces that he is from God. Okay, that's what I'm looking for. All right. Okay.
Well, he doesn't announce it here. That's in that's in Surah 297.
All right, which I have no reason to believe here.
Well, why should I believe anything from the Book of Acts? You asked me the question.
This is the point.
I could give you 100 things about the Book of Acts that are believable. You could just go to my channel. I have like a giant video.
But this is the deflection. This is the point. This is the point, Clinton. You're accusing Paul. You bring in accusations against Paul and his revelation. Yet, if you were to have the same energy towards Islam, you would have to reject it. You have no reason to believe his experience in the cave.
You asked me.
This angel, Clinton, I need you to pay attention, Clinton. Pay attention.
Okay.
You recognize that according to the history of the prophets, Muhammad's experience in the cave is nothing like what they've experienced historically, right?
Well, not nothing. It is unique.
So it's nothing. It doesn't match the historicity of how prophets receive revelation, right?
I said that one part where, well, actually the two parts that you mentioned, that he stayed in fear, and also at that moment, the angel did not say his name.
And the oppression, the physical oppression, right?
Well, that's staying in fear. Or that's how
okay. So the adding unto his fear, physically attacking him, and not announcing that he's from God or who he is. This is completely unproper, right?
I know. I granted the two of those aspects are, but the attacking, I actually analogize to the wrestling with Jacob. So
hold on a second. Does it say that the angel of the Lord attacked Jacob, or does it say that Jacob attacked the angel, meaning Jacob is the one who took hold of the angel while the angel was trying to get him off?
Well, they wrestled, and then the angel would actually
What was the source of the wrestling? Was it that the angel came and attacked Jacob, or was it that Jacob grabbed hold of the angel when the angel was about to leave?
Right. So, okay. Well, I disagree with you. Yeah.
All right. So it wasn't that the angel attacked Jacob, like we see this spirit attacks Muhammad, right?
So it's a little different, yes.
No, that's not a little different. It's completely different. We have the angel being attacked by Jacob. We have the angel being attacked by Jacob. We have the spirit of Muhammad being attacked by this spirit. Completely different.
But they are wrestling each other.
No, do you see any wrestling going on here in the cave?
Well, nobody died.
Wrestling this spirit, or is he getting dog walked?
Well,
but did you die?
Jacob found that he could not overcome the angel.
Clinton, why do you have an empty tomb for I'm kind of confused.
Well, that has something to do about Paul's belief in the empty tomb, or if it is empty or not. But that's a side question. So Logic, I will grant you your point. We differ a little bit on maybe the edges, but I do grant that Muhammad's visitation is unique. And that's also because Muhammad
doesn't match historically. It doesn't match historically, so therefore you should reject Muhammad.
Well, I don't know if I wouldn't say it doesn't. When I say that Paul isn't matching historically, I mean that everything that Paul says is not just unique. It contradicts what we know about history. For example,
so does it? This is why I brought you to this. I'm seeing if you're going to be consistent. When we know the history of the prophets, do we know them to be attacked by a spirit to get revelation?
But no.
Thank you. So therefore, reject Muhammad because he was attacked by a spirit to receive his revelation. So therefore, it contradicts the history of revelation. Can we agree?
Well, okay. So I wouldn't do that because each of the prophets.
Because you're a Muslim.
Well, hold on. Each of the prophets have no, GodLogic, you're funny. Each of the prophets have different unique encounters with God.
Do any of their encounters contradict the others?
Well, I don't think Muhammad's encounters, how's that contradicting because it's unique?
Okay. So I understand that you're trying to frame it as unique. It's not unique.
If you don't
I'll say it again. When you have prophets, they never think that they're demon possessed after an experience with God, do they?
I cannot think of someone thinking that they were possessed by the demon.
The answer is no.
How about suicidal?
Or suicidal? Are any of the prophets ever suicidal after an experience with God?
No.
Nope. So we see Muhammad is suicidal after his experience in the cave, and he is oppressed in his experience in the cave. So this experience contradicts the historicity of revelation with the prophets, right?
I would not phrase that way, but I understand.
I know you would. You're Muslim.
Well, again, I would just say that.
Okay, hold on. If Paul, right? If this was Paul, switch roles. If Paul was suicidal after seeing the risen Jesus.
After seeing this light, this supposed light,
a light in a cave. If this was Paul, you would be blasting this from the top of every minaret.
No. Because my problem with Paul, I was just making the comparison that there's a little oppression and fear going on there. My problem with Paul isn't that the apparition on the road to Damascus. My problem is that everything.
What you brought up.
Well, no, okay. The problem is everything around that, right? So when he goes to the high priest,
stop. I have to stop you here, Clinton, because now you're being dishonest. Well, not now, but you're continuously being dishonest, man.
I think
the first thing you brought up for your problem with Paul was the apparition on his way to Damascus. That's the first thing you said.
Well, okay, yes. So I do. That is problematic, but the reason why it's problematic, it's not problematic on its own, right? That would be, if it was, then I would be actually a hypocrite, right?
You know what? Say that again.
If the apparition of Jesus on the road to Damascus was problematic alone, then I would be a hypocrite. But that's not my argument.
Got it. Okay.
You guys cut me off. I don't believe in his apparition, but the reason why I don't believe in his apparition is because all the context clues around it don't make sense. For example, when Paul goes to Caiaphas and Antipas, the high priest, this is already a mismatch. We are told by Paul that he's a Pharisee of Pharisees. Well, why would a Pharisee of Pharisees be working for the high priest, who's a Sadducee of Sadducees, and the Pharisees and the Sadducees are essentially at war?
Clinton, that's not hard. That's not hard.
Okay, then
that's not hard at all. Like, that's not hard. Why would a Spurs fan and a Golden State fan root against the Lakers if they were in the playoffs?
That's not even a compromise. Okay,
I'm just saying, like, an enemy of an enemy is my friend.
Okay,
they would be more than happy to do that. And the high priest did irregular things all the time. They did irregular things with the trial with Jesus and the way they did that. That's not that weird. You're doing a priori history. You're deciding in advance what would or would not happen based on your own like ideas.
Well, the Pharisees literally kill Antipas. So I don't. It's not just that they wouldn't work with them. They end up later killing.
What does that have to do with them having a combined goal to get rid of this Jesus?
I'm sorry. Say that one more time.
What does that have to do with them having a combined goal to get rid of this Jesus narrative and this explosion?
Well, again, so he goes to the high priest to get letters to go to Damascus to persecute Christians. There's nothing about that is historical. There's no evidence.
No. You've decided, Clinton, you've decided in advance that can't be historical. But history is not like that. You don't think no. Hold up. Yeah, well, of course there's not an external thing. So many different historical records that we have are from a single source. If we just threw out everything, that we thought doesn't quite jibe, and if we threw out everything that we just decided in advance is unlikely, then we wouldn't know a whole lot about history.
Unlikely. There's literally not a single reference in all of the historical texts that we have of the functional Sanhedrin in Jerusalem of an extra-regional extradition, especially under the Roman occupation.
What does that got to do with anything?
But Clinton, you're arguing from silence. Okay, and are you aware of all the other like arguments for the reliability of the Book of Acts? Do you know anything about that, or are you just finding like one thing that you can decide in advance is just too unlikely to happen?
Let's use this man's logic. Do we have anything? Do we have anything in Egypt or Egyptologists? Do we have anything in their sources or history, Eric, that mention crucifixion?
We do not.
So why in the world is the Quran having Pharaoh talk about people being crucified?
Well, actually, historically, people were being crucified because remember, Rome overtook parts of Egypt, and so I guess
what does that got to do with Pharaoh way before Rome mentioning crucifixion?
Well, crucifixions, although they would come to be known as a uniquely Roman execution, they actually started well before. Do you have any evidence within Egypt and their sources that they were performing crucifixions? Not in Egypt, but in North Africa.
Oh, so you don't have anything? You have nothing in Egypt claiming that the pharaohs were performing or ordering crucifixions. Yet you have Muhammad talking about that the pharaoh was issuing out crucifixions, when historically we have no accounts of that even existing at that time. So Muhammad must be a false prophet. Do you know that we don't have, or do you just simply not know? Because I don't know. I don't know. I know that we don't have nothing in Sanhedrin. There's nothing.
Saying that.
There's nothing. We know
that
the Persians. We know that the Persians are the ones that came up.
I'm going to follow up with an email. I'm going to follow up an email with this one because this is different. I'm willing to say.
It's different.
Well, in the sense that I'm willing to say that I don't know that if in the Egyptian case, if there were specifically Roman style crucifixions happening during the time of Pharaoh. That Muhammad,
and when you find that there wasn't, then Muhammad's a false prophet for being anti-historical, right?
It will definitely deal a blow.
No doubts. You're a capper. Get the heck out of my house.
That's right.
I'm a what?
I'm just ripping off the Sneeko.
What's the difference though? I actually studied the Jerusalem Sanhedrin. There's not a single record. Because
but again, you're doing a priori history. I've actually studied.
No, hold on.
The history of the.
Testify. Let me speak here. But what's happening in the first centuries, there's a lot of different Jewish heresies. And so
did you study the Quran? Did you study the Quran like you studied the Sanhedrin?
Well, the Sanhedrin is well, to me, it's not, but yes, I've studied the Quran. But the point is on the Sanhedrin.
So the same way that you studied these sources, you studied the Quran the same way and found that it is anti-historical, right?
Logic. I like I said, I think that your point about the crucifixion needs to be looked into further.
It doesn't need to be looked into further. There's nothing that exists.
I need to prove it for myself because you haven't cited any historical references. You haven't cited any.
Neither have you. You're just arguing from silence.
I just cited the Sanhedrin record.
But regarding what?
About extraditions. There are no extra-regional extradition of Jews to the Jerusalem Sanhedrin from around.
According to what? Are you saying that there's not any? Are you saying that there's a negation of this, or you're just saying that we don't have a record of that?
We have the record of the Sanhedrin and its trials.
That's not what I asked. I asked, are you saying that you have records negating a joint, a joint decision to go?
That's a ridiculous question. You're asking me to prove a negative. You're asking me to prove a negative. That's intellectually dishonest.
No, I'm not asking you to prove. You're saying that this is a negative. This act says it's a positive. You're saying, no, this couldn't have happened because we don't have a record of a joint, extra regional joint mission, whatever.
No, you're asking me. No. The way that you're asking me the question is an evidence. You're asking me, do I have documentation that explicitly?
This is what I'm asking. This is what I'm asking. Are you saying that the sources that you're reading negate a joint regional, whatever you said thing?
Now that you put it that way, yes, because in Roman sources, it is the Romans who have the political authority, and that's.
But where does? Wait, hold on a second. Who has the authority over the Jewish jurisdiction and their laws and their customs and how they punish each other?
Specifically, the religious.
Thank you. Exactly. So Rome left that up to the religious leaders to deal with their own people when it came to their religious customs and their laws, right?
As it crossed into Romish jurisdiction, which
this had nothing to do with Roman. This had nothing to do with Roman jurisdiction.
Because the Jerusalem Sanhedrin doesn't have any authority over the Jews in Damascus. Damascus is in a totally different province. It's not even part of Israel.
Hold on. What is your evidence of this?
You don't know that Damascus is not part of Israel?
No. What I'm asking is, what is your evidence that they don't follow the orders of the high priest? The high priest.
Who doesn't follow the Romans?
The Jews in Damascus not following the orders of the high priest, the religious leaders of the Sanhedrin or the Pharisees.
Well, I don't know what you mean by orders. We're talking about extradition.
Dude, you just said that the Jews in Damascus are not under the authority of the high priest in Jerusalem. That's what you said.
Yeah, that's exactly true.
What is your evidence of this?
That's not that there's, first of all, each of the outside communities in diaspora in Judaism had at this time local or small Sanhedrins that dealt with their local issues.
I'm talking about the high priest. What is your evidence that they were not under the orders of the high priest? How many high priests were there?
At the time that we're talking about Antipas and Caiaphas.
So how many high priests were there?
Well, those two. And then we're talking about the Sanhedrin, which is a court of 72.
And they're the high priest over who?
They're the high priest over Jerusalem.
Over just Jerusalem?
And more specifically, they're the temple administration.
Oh, are they the high priests of the Jews only in Jerusalem?
Well, actually, now that you're asking, we do have extradition record that they were able to extradite people in and around Jerusalem, which is still very much in Israel. So they're over Israel and they're over.
They're over Israel. So even the Jews in Damascus are under them.
No, they're over the state of Israel, the nation state of Israel, not the people, not the Jewish people in France.
Nice. So it looks like I mean we can go in circles on this all day.
You're gonna beat my head open with this.
Yeah, but I'm done beating it up. It looks like the reasons why you reject Paul are the reasons why you should reject Muhammad. That's what it looks like to me.
Well, like I told you that on the crucifixion issue, I will definitely, if I can, I'll follow back up with an email. And if I'm wrong, I can admit that. But what I'm interested in here is why you can't admit that this entire story. We just refuted everything you just tried to say. Your argument is weak. You didn't refute it. Your
argument is weak.
Clinton, I have an hour-long video on the reliability of the Book of Acts. My friend David Paulman has an hour-long video on the reliability of the Book of Acts. You can read Colin Hemmer, The Book of Acts in the Setting of Hellenistic History. You can read William Paley, Jorge, Paul, and I. You can read those.
I have a dozen different scholars you can read on the Book of Acts too, and a lot.
Yeah, and I would go up against any of those scholars' opinions. I would put any of the people that I just named.
Okay, well, I just
up against them, and until you can read.
If you can do this,
Clinton.
I hear you.
Until you can read and articulate the positive side for the Book of Acts and put it in a steel man position, then I didn't finish. Why are you jumping in?
Okay.
Then I don't want to hear it until you can steel man the position for the reliability of the Book of Acts and actually look into it yourself. And I'm telling you, this is going to be rewarding reading for you.
Well, I do think
then you don't have a leg to stand on when it comes to criticizing it. I've heard all of this.
Well, I think, for example,
I've heard all of this stuff
Acts does a really good job.
You came on and you changed the topic. So if Paul put himself and said, "Hey guys, I'm the apostle to the Gentiles according to Hosea chapter 17," that would obviously be a huge red flag. And so we've already seen historically, you said that things don't lie. We've already said that there's a difference in the experiences with the prophets. Well, this is another thing that no true prophet would ever do. And so that's two things. And so look into the crucifixion thing. Look into the materials that I'm recommending you on the Book of Acts. At least jump onto my buddy David's video on the Book of Acts.
Well, I haven't.
Email me where he's wrong. That's what I'd like to know.
The Book of Acts is the longest book in the New Testament. I'm only talking about actually two specific parts. So there's a lot in the Book of Acts I think is credible. For example, although the Book of Hebrews will say that Jesus is the final and ultimate sacrifice, we'll see in the Book of Acts that the disciples continue to bring sacrifices in accordance with the law of Moses up until the time that the temple is destroyed. And I think that's probably a very reliable history.
Thanks.
So the parts that disagree with our theology is the parts that you're going to be like, oh, that's probably good. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Well, not necessarily. I agree that.
I'm gonna go ahead and bring up the next person, man.
All right, thank you guys.
Yep. Good talking to you, man.